It was one of those mornings in Chicago when the air felt sharp enough to cut through your coat, but not quite cold enough to keep people indoors. The city was already humming, taxis honking, coffee shops steaming, suits rushing past with their eyes glued to phones. On a quiet side street just off Michigan Avenue, tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a laundromat that never seemed to close, a young woman sat with her back against the brick wall, knees pulled to her chest, a thin gray blanket wrapped around her shoulders like armor. She hadn't slept much. Sleep on the street wasn't really sleep. It was more like drifting in and out of awareness, ears tuned to every footstep, every car door slam, every shout from a block away. She'd learned to read danger like street signs. Her cardboard sign propped beside her in careful block letters read, "Anything helps. Trying to get home." It wasn't a lie. She was trying to get home. Not to a house with a white picket fence, but to a place where she could breathe without looking over her shoulder. 8 months ago, she'd left everything behind in a small town in Indiana after things got too dark, too fast. She hadn't planned to end up on the streets of a big city, but when you're running with nothing but a backpack and a bus ticket that runs out too soon, plans don't last long. She kept her head down most of the time, not out of shame. She'd shed that early on, but because eye contact invited either pity or suspicion, and she'd had enough of both. Still, she noticed people. She saw the woman who dropped $1 in her cup every Tuesday without saying a word. She saw the teenager who pretended not to see her, eyes darting away like she was a ghost. And she saw the man in the charcoal overcoat who paused just a few feet away, holding a paper cup of coffee, watching her longer than most. He wasn't like the others. He didn't fumble in his pocket for change, didn't snap a photo for social media, didn't mutter something under his breath about laziness or drugs. He just stood there quiet like he was trying to figure something out. He looked to be in his late 40s with tired eyes and a sharp jawline, the kind of man who probably gave orders in boardrooms and signed checks most people couldn't imagine. His shoes were polished, his coat expensive but not flashy. He took a slow sip of his coffee, then set the cup down on a nearby bench. Then, without a word, he reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a wallet. Not a cheap one, thick leather, worn smooth at the edges. He flipped it open, and instead of pulling out a few bills or a business card, he took out something that made her blink twice. It was a credit card. But not just any credit card. It was black. Sleek matte with no number printed on the front, just a subtle logo in silver. She'd seen pictures of these before in articles about billionaires and celebrities. People called it the black card, and rumor had it had no spending limit. You could buy a car with it, a plane ticket, a whole wardrobe. She'd always thought it was just a myth, something made up to make rich people seem even more untouchable. And now, this stranger was holding it out to her. "Take it," he said, voice low but clear. "Buy what you need." She didn't move. Her hand stayed tucked under the blanket. "What?" she asked, voice rough from disuse. "The card," he said, stepping closer. "Use it. Get food. Get warm clothes. Whatever you need." She stared at the card like it might burn her. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged, but there was something in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or a challenge. Call it an experiment. That word, experiment, and sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the weather. Was this some kind of setup? A hidden camera? A rich guy testing whether a homeless person would steal or run? She'd heard stories like that. People pretending to help just to humiliate you later on the internet. Her stomach twisted, but then she looked at his face again. There was no smirk. No glint of mockery, just a quiet intensity like he was waiting to see what kind of person she really was. Slowly, she reached out. Her fingers were chapped and red from the cold, but she took the card gently as if it were something fragile. It felt heavier than it should have. "Don't worry," he said. "It's real. No tricks." She nodded, not trusting her voice. He turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into the stream of morning commuters like he'd never stopped at all. She sat there for a long time, the black card resting in her palm. Her mind raced. She could sell it. There were people who'd pay good money for something like this. On the dark web maybe, or through shady contacts she'd met on the street. She could buy a week's worth of meals, a hotel room, even a bus ticket out of the city. Or she could go wild. Buy designer clothes, fancy meals, things she hadn't even let herself dream about in months. But something held her back. It wasn't just fear of getting caught, though that was real. It was something deeper, If she used this card recklessly, she'd be proving him right, proving that people like her, people with nothing, couldn't be trusted with anything. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to be that person. She looked down at her sign. Trying to get home. That was still true. And if she was really trying, then this card wasn't a shortcut, it was a test. Not just of her honesty, but of her hope. She stood up, folded her blanket carefully, and tucked the card into the inner pocket of her jacket, the one with the broken zipper she'd sewn shut with dental floss. She walked 3 blocks to the nearest bank, her boots scuffing against the wet sidewalk. Inside, the air was warm, quiet, almost too clean. She approached a teller, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Linda. I need to check something, she said, voice barely above a whisper. About a credit card. Linda didn't flinch. Didn't look at her clothes or her hair or the dirt on her boots. She just smiled. Sure, honey. What do you need? She handed over the black card. Linda's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't say anything. She swiped it through a machine, typed something into her computer, then looked up. It's valid, she said softly. And it's got a very high limit. Are you the card holder? No, she admitted. A man gave it to me. Said I could use it. Linda studied her for a long moment. Then quietly, you planning to use it wisely? She nodded. I just need a few things. To get back on my feet. Linda handed the card back. Then God bless you, she said. And be careful. That was all it took. She left the bank and walked to a nearby grocery store. Not a fancy one. Just a regular chain with fluorescent lights and squeaky carts. She bought a loaf of whole wheat bread, a jar of peanut butter, a bag of apples, and a thermos of hot soup from the deli counter. Then she went to a thrift store 2 blocks over, where the coats were $5 and smelled faintly of mothballs. She found a thick navy parka, tried it on in the cramped changing room, and bought it with the card. It was warm. It fit. Next, she went to the bus station. She asked about tickets to Indianapolis, the closest big city to where her grandmother used to live. She didn't know if her grandma was still there, or if she'd even remember her, but it was the only place that felt like it might offer a real chance. The ticket cost $42. She paid with the card, kept the receipt. By late afternoon, she was back in the same alley, sitting in the same spot, the black card tucked safely in her pocket, along with the receipts neatly folded in her hand. She didn't know if he'd come back. Maybe he'd already forgotten about her. Maybe the whole thing had been a whim, a rich man's passing fancy. But she waited anyway. And the next morning, just after 8, she saw him again. Same overcoat, same coffee cup, same calm stride. He spotted her immediately. His step slowed. He looked surprised, genuinely surprised, not just that she was there, but that she looked different, cleaner, warmer, more like herself. She stood up, brushed off her pants, and walked toward him. She didn't say anything at first, just held out the black card, along with the small stack of receipts. He took them slowly, scanning the slips of paper. Groceries, coat, bus ticket. Total, $287.39. You didn't spend much, he said. I didn't need much, she replied. Just enough to keep going. He looked at her then, not through her, not past her, but at her. Like he was seeing her for the first time. Why didn't you take more? He asked. She thought about it. Because I'm not trying to get rich, she said. I'm trying to get home. He didn't respond right away. Just stood there, the city noise fading into the background. Then quietly, what's your name? She told him. He nodded. I'm sorry you've had to go through all this. It's okay, she said. I'm still here. And in that moment, something shifted, not just between them, but inside him. He'd given her the card as a test, sure. But what she'd done with it wasn't just honest. It was human, real. And it made him question everything he thought he knew about people who fall through the cracks. He slipped the card back into his wallet. But he didn't walk away this time. Listen, he said, I run a company. We're hiring. Not for anything fancy, just answering phones, helping customers. But it's a start. And we offer training. If you're serious about getting back on your feet, maybe you'd consider it. She looked at him, really looked, saw no pity, no strings attached, just an offer, plain and simple. I'd like that, she said. He handed her a business card, plain white, black text, no logo, no title, just a name, a phone number, and an address. Come by Monday, he said. Ask for me at the front desk. She took the card, folded it carefully, and put it in the same pocket as the receipts. Thank you, she said. He nodded, then turned and walked away. This time not like a stranger, but like someone who'd just witnessed something worth remembering. And she? She sat back down, not because she had to, but because her legs felt weak with relief. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. The black card was gone, but something else had taken its place. A chance. Small, fragile, but real. And that was enough. For now. The weekend stretched long and quiet. For the first time in months, she didn't spend it huddled, under bridges or ducking into library bathrooms to wash her face in cold sink water. Instead, she found a cheap hostel near the bus station, $25 a night for a bunk in a room with 3 other women, all of them tired, all of them trying to hold on to something. She paid with the last of the cash she'd saved from odd jobs, bottles. Collected, cans returned. A few hours sweeping floors at a diner that paid under the table. She showered until the hot water ran out, washed her hair with a tiny bar of soap someone had left behind, and laid out the navy parka she'd bought to dry on the edge of her bed. It still smelled like mothballs, but now it also smelled like hope. She kept the business card from the man in her coat pocket, touching it every few hours like a talisman. Monday morning felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, exciting, terrifying, and utterly unknown. She didn't own a suit or even a pair of dress pants, but she did have a clean pair of dark jeans, a plain black sweater with no holes, and boots that didn't squeak too badly. She braided her hair tightly, washed her face one more time, and walked the 10 blocks to the address on the card. The building wasn't flashy, just a modern glass tower with a quiet lobby and a receptionist who looked up from her computer with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to see him," she said, suddenly realizing she didn't even know his name. She held out the business card. The receptionist glanced at it, then nodded. Go ahead. Elevator to the 14th floor. Ask for Mr. Langston at the front desk." She rode the elevator in silence, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The doors opened to a bright, open office space. Cubicles, whiteboards covered in colorful notes, people chatting over coffee. It felt like another planet. She approached the front desk on the 14th floor where a young man with glasses looked up. "I'm here to see Mr. Langston," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He checked his screen. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he told me to come Monday, said to ask for him." The man studied her for a moment, not unkindly, just carefully, then picked up a phone. A minute later, the man from the street appeared at the end of the hallway. He wore the same calm expression, but there was something softer in his eyes now. "You came," he said simply. She nodded. "You said to." He led her to a small conference room with a glass wall and a round table. No fancy chairs, no intimidating portraits, just a clean space with bottled water and notepads. He sat across from her. "I don't have a resume," she said before he could ask. "I haven't worked in an office before. I don't know Excel or anything like that." "That's okay," he said. "We'll teach you what you need. But I do need to know. Why do you want this job?" She took a breath. "Because I want to stand on my own 2 feet. Not because someone gave me a handout, but because I earned it, and because I don't want to be invisible anymore." He didn't write anything down, just listened. Then he leaned forward slightly. "This job won't be glamorous. You'll answer calls from frustrated customers. You'll log complaints. You'll follow scripts. Some days people will yell at you for things that aren't your fault. Can you handle that?" "Yes," she said. "I've handled worse." He nodded. "We'll start you on a 2-week trial. Minimum wage plus lunch stipend. If it works out, we'll talk about training and advancement. Fair?" "More than fair," she said. And just like that, she had a job. The first week was harder than she expected. Not because the work was difficult, but because everything felt foreign. The headset felt heavy on her ears. The computer screen blinked with codes and menus she didn't understand. Her fingers fumbled over the keyboard. But she watched, listened, asked questions when she could. The woman who trained her, older with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone, didn't treat her like a charity case. She corrected her gently, praised her when she got something right, and once even brought her a muffin when she saw her skipping lunch to catch up on calls. By the second week, she was finding her rhythm. She learned how to calm an angry customer by just listening, really listening, instead of rushing to fix the problem. She noticed patterns. People weren't mad about late packages. They were stressed about birthdays, weddings, medical supplies. She started adding little notes in the system. Customer's mom is in hospice, handle with care. And soon, other team members began doing the same. One afternoon, during a quiet lull, she overheard two co-workers complaining about how the return process was confusing for elderly customers. That night, instead of going straight back to the hostel, she sat in a coffee shop with a notebook and sketched out a simpler step-by-step guide. Big print, clear icons, no jargon. The next day, she slipped it under the door of the operations manager's office. She didn't expect anything to happen, but 2 days later, the man from the street, Mr. Langston, called her into his office. He held her handwritten guide in his hand. "Did you make this?" he asked. She nodded, bracing for criticism. "I know it's not professional." "It's brilliant," he interrupted. "We're printing 500 copies and including them in every package going to customers over 65. And we're adding a link to a digital version on our website." She blinked. "Really?" "Really," he said. "You saw a problem no one else noticed, and you fixed it without being asked. That's the kind of thinking we need." Word spread quietly around the office. The new girl, the one who'd come in off the street, was sharp, observant, kind, but not soft. People started asking her opinion on small things, how to phrase an email, whether a new script sounded too robotic. She never bragged, never acted like she knew more than she did. She just showed up, did the work, and treated everyone, janitors, managers, delivery drivers, with the same quiet respect. Meanwhile, Mr. Langston found himself watching her more than he realized. Not in a creepy way, just noticing. How she stayed late to finish a report. How she brought in homemade cookies one Friday just because. How she never complained, even when the system crashed and they had to redo an entire shift's worth of calls. One evening, as he was leaving, he saw her sitting alone in the break room, textbooks spread out on the table. She was highlighting passages in a business fundamentals book, chewing on the end of a pen. "You're taking classes?" he asked, leaning in the doorway. She looked up, startled. "Night school, 2 nights a week. They have a program for people who didn't finish high school. I'm working toward my diploma first, then maybe an associate's degree." He nodded slowly. "That takes guts." "It takes time," she said with a small smile, "but I've got time now." He didn't say anything else, but the next day HR sent her an email. She'd been approved for the company's tuition assistance program, full coverage for GED prep, and up to $5,000 a year for college courses after that. She cried in the bathroom stall that afternoon, not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of someone believing in her enough to invest in her future. As the weeks turned into months, something else began to shift, not just in her life, but in the culture of the office. People started talking about opportunity hires. The HR team began visiting shelters and job fairs, looking beyond resumes to character and potential. Mr. Langston even gave a talk at a leadership conference about hiring for heart, though he never mentioned her by name. But she knew, and that was enough. One Saturday, she took the bus across town to the women's shelter where she'd spent her first few nights in the city. She didn't go as a former resident. She went as a volunteer. She helped sort donations, served meals, and sat with women who looked just like she had months ago, exhausted, wary, but still fighting. "I got a job," she told one young woman who'd just arrived, eyes red from crying. "Not because I had experience, but because someone gave me a chance. You're not broken. You're just in a hard chapter." The woman looked at her, really looked. "How do I even start?" "Show up," she said. "Even when you're scared, especially when you're scared." Back at the office, her reputation kept growing. She wasn't just good at customer service, she was becoming a quiet leader. When a new hire struggled with anxiety, she stayed late to walk them through the system. When the team morale dipped after a tough quarter, she organized a potluck in the break room. Everyone brought one dish, and for an hour, they weren't employees. They were just people sharing food and stories. Mr. Langston watched all of this unfold from a distance, rarely interfering but always paying attention. He'd started this whole thing as a test, half curiosity, half skepticism. But what she'd done with that test wasn't just impressive. It was transformative, not just for her but for him. He'd built his company on efficiency, margins, and results. But watching her, he began to see that the real engine of any business wasn't spreadsheets. It was people. Real, messy, resilient people. One afternoon, he called her into his office again. This time, there was no script, no trial period to discuss. "We're creating a new role," he said. "Customer experience advocate. You'd work directly with product teams, translate customer feedback into real changes, and mentor new hires. It's a step up, more pay, more responsibility." She stared at him. "Me? Yes, you," he said. "You've earned it." She didn't say yes right away. She asked questions about hours, expectations, growth paths. She wanted to be sure she could handle it without dropping her classes. He assured her the company would support her schedule. That night, she sat on her bunk in the hostel. She'd moved to a shared apartment by then, but still kept her old habits and wrote a letter to her grandmother. She didn't know if it would reach her, but she wrote it anyway. "I'm working. I'm learning. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm becoming someone." The next Monday, she accepted the new role, and as she walked back to her desk, a young intern stopped her in the hallway. "Hey," the intern said shyly, "I heard you used to be, on the streets." She didn't flinch. "I was. Do you ever feel like you don't belong here?" She thought about it. "Sometimes. But then I remember, I belong anywhere I show up with honesty and hard work." "And so do you," the intern smiled. "Thanks." She kept walking head high, not because she was proud of where she'd been, but because she was proud of how far she'd come, and how she'd done it without losing herself. The black card was long gone, returned and forgotten. But what it had started, the trust, the chance, the ripple of kindness, was still growing. And she knew deep in her bones that this was only the beginning. Life had a way of settling into rhythm once you found your footing. For her, that rhythm started with an alarm at 5:30 a.m., a quick shower in the tiny bathroom she now shared with 2 roommates in a modest apartment on the city's south side, and a thermos of strong coffee she brewed the night before. She'd traded the hostel bunk for a real bed, the parka for a second-hand winter coat that actually fit, and the constant knot of fear in her stomach for something quieter, purpose. Her new role as customer experience advocate wasn't just a title. It was a bridge. She sat in meetings with product designers and logistics managers, translating the raw, messy emotions of customers into clear, actionable feedback. "People aren't mad about a delayed package," she'd say during one strategy session. "They're mad because it's their kid's birthday tomorrow and they promised a gift. We can't always control delivery times, but we can control how we talk to them when things go wrong." The room would go quiet, then nod. Someone would scribble notes. And within weeks, the company rolled out a new empathy script for service reps. Simple phrases like, "I understand this matters," and "let me see what I can do," instead of robotic apologies. She never took credit. She just kept showing up, listening, connecting dots others missed. But work wasn't the only place she was building something. On Tuesday and Thursday nights after her shift ended at 6, she took the bus across town to the community college. Her GED classes were harder than she expected, math especially. But she stayed late, asked questions, formed a study group with 2 other women who'd also left school too early. They met at the library, shared snacks, and cheered each other on when someone finally cracked a tough algebra problem. The teacher, a retired engineer with kind eyes and a dry sense of humor, pulled her aside one evening. "You've got a natural mind for systems," he said. "Ever thought about business or logistics?" She hadn't. But now she did. Back at the office, people started coming to her not just for customer insights, but for advice. A young man on the tech team confessed he was struggling to speak up in meetings. "I feel like no one hears me," he said over coffee in the break room. "Then say less but mean more," she told him. "Pick one thing you really care about, say it clearly, and stop talking. People listen when you're not trying to fill the silence." He tried it the next day. got a nod from the department head, came back grinning. She also began visiting the women's shelter again, not just to volunteer, but to speak. Once a month, she'd sit in the common room with a circle of women wrapped in donated blankets, some with kids clinging to their legs, others staring at the floor like they'd given up. She didn't preach. She just told her story, plain and honest. I didn't have a plan, she'd say. I just knew I didn't want to stay stuck. One step, then another. That's all it takes. One woman, barely older than a teenager, raised her hand. But what if no one gives you a chance? Then you make your own, she replied. Start small. Show up clean, be on time. Ask for help like you mean it, not like you're begging. People notice. She started a little program with the shelter's coordinator, job readiness workshops. She taught resume basics. Even if you've never had a real job, you've managed survival, that skill. How to answer tough interview questions. Yes, I was homeless, and here's what that taught me about resilience. And how to dress for an interview using thrift store finds. She even convinced the company to host a shadow day, where shelter residents could spend a few hours in the office, see what a real workplace felt like, meet real people. Mr. Langston supported it quietly. No press, no fanfare. Just space, time, and a few donated laptops for the workshop. Meanwhile, he found himself changing too. He'd always run his company like a machine, efficient, precise, results-driven. But watching her work, he began to see the value in what he'd once dismissed as soft skills. Empathy wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Trust wasn't naive, it was leverage. He started holding listening tours, walking the floor, sitting with teams, asking not what's broken, but what's working. He even apologized once publicly to a team he'd unfairly criticized during a stressful quarter. People were stunned. Then they stood up and clapped. He didn't tell anyone, but he'd started keeping a small notebook in his desk drawer. In it, he wrote down things she said. People don't need fixing. They need believing in. Kindness isn't free, it costs attention. He wasn't copying her. He was learning. One rainy afternoon, she knocked on his office door. He looked up from his screen. Come in, she held a folder. I've been thinking, she said. We help customers, we help employees, but what about the people outside our doors? The ones no one sees? He leaned back. Go on. There's a nonprofit downtown that helps survivors of domestic violence rebuild their lives. Housing, counseling, job training. They're underfunded. I've been volunteering there on weekends. They need basics, laptops, interview clothes, even bus passes. He didn't hesitate. How much? She named a number, modest, realistic. He doubled it on the spot. Make it a company partnership, he said. Not charity, partnership. We'll offer internships, mentorship, maybe even hire from their program. She smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. Thank you. No, he said. Thank you. You reminded me why we're really here. That partnership became one of the company's proudest initiatives. Within 6 months, 3 women from the nonprofit had joined the customer service team. One was now training to be a tech support specialist. They weren't inspiration stories for the company newsletter. They were colleagues, friends, people with full lives, pasts they didn't hide, futures they were building. At home, her life kept growing too. She'd saved enough to buy a used laptop, which she used for school and to help other shelter residents draft cover letters. She cooked simple meals, pasta, beans, roasted vegetables, and sometimes invited her roommates to join her. They'd talk about their days, their dreams, the weird things they saw on the bus. Normal stuff. The kind of stuff she used to watch from the outside, like it belonged to another world. One evening, after a long study session, she opened her email and saw a message from the community college. She'd passed her GED exam with honors. She read the email 3 times, then called her study group. They screamed, laughed, cried a little. That weekend, they went out for pizza. Her treat paid for with her first full paycheck from the new role. She didn't post about it on social media. Didn't need to. The victory was quiet, personal, real. Back at work, her influence kept spreading. When the company redesigned its onboarding process, she insisted new hires spend their first day not in training modules, but shadowing customer service reps. You need to hear real voices before you make decisions about them, she argued. They listened. She also started a second chance fund, a small pool of money funded by voluntary employee donations to help coworkers in crisis. A single mom whose car broke down. A man whose apartment flooded. Small grants, no questions asked. Just enough to keep someone from falling through the cracks. Mr. Langston matched every dollar. People began calling her the heart of the company, but she hated that phrase. "I'm not the heart," she'd say. "I'm just someone who remembers what it feels like to be forgotten." One Friday, as she was packing up to leave, Mr. Langston stopped by her desk. "Got a minute?" She followed him to a small meeting room. On the table was a brochure, a local university's evening business program. Tuition covered, fully funded by the company. "We'd like you to apply," he said, "not because we expect anything in return, but because you deserve it." She picked up the brochure, fingers tracing the embossed logo. "I'm not ready," she said softly. "You're more ready than most," he replied. "And if you say yes, we'll adjust your schedule. You'll still work, still get paid. School won't be easy, but you've never taken the easy path." She looked out the window. The city lights were coming on, soft and steady. She thought about the alley where she'd sat with her cardboard sign, the bank where she'd verified the black card. The first day she walked into this building, terrified but determined. "I'll apply," she said. He nodded. Good. That night she didn't go straight home. She walked to the alley, not to stay but to stand there for a moment. The wall was the same. The streetlight still flickered, but she was different. She touched the spot where she used to sit, then turned and walked away, not looking back. The next week she submitted her application. A few days later she got in. As the semester began, her days stretched longer. Work until 6, class until 9, homework until midnight. She was tired, yes, but it was a good tired. The kind that comes from building something that matters, and through it all she never forgot where she came from. Every month, without fail, she returned to the shelter, not as a success story to be admired, but as a friend who'd walked the same path. She brought coffee, listened more than she spoke, and always left with a heart full of gratitude, not for the black card, not for the job, but for the simple, powerful truth that had carried her through. People are more than their worst day. And sometimes, all it takes is one person seeing you, not as a problem, but as a possibility, to help you see it too. 2 years had passed since that cold morning in the alley, and the city felt different now. Not because it had changed, but because she moved through it differently. She no longer hugged the walls or avoided eye contact. She walked with her shoulders back, not out of pride, but because she finally felt like she belonged, not in a mansion or a spotlight, but in the everyday rhythm of life, paying rent, studying for exams, grabbing coffee with coworkers, calling her grandmother on Sundays. She was halfway through her associate's degree in business administration, and the company had promoted her again, this time to lead a small team focused on community partnerships. It wasn't a corner office or a fancy title, but it meant she could shape how the company showed up in the world beyond profits. She'd helped launch a program that placed interns from shelters and recovery centers into paid, supported roles across departments. Most stayed. Some even moved into full-time positions. One young man who'd once slept under a bridge near the river now managed the company's social media and did it better than anyone before him. But success hadn't softened her. If anything, it made her sharper, more aware of how fragile stability could be. She still checked her bank balance twice a day. She still saved every spare dollar. She still flinched a little when someone raised their voice too fast. The past didn't vanish, it just became part of her, like a scar that reminded you how strong you'd become. One afternoon, she got a call from the women's shelter. A new resident had arrived the night before, early 20s, quiet, eyes full of the same exhaustion she remembered all too well. The coordinator asked if she'd be willing to talk to her. "She won't eat," the woman said. "Won't speak to anyone, but she asked if you were real." She went that evening, still in her work clothes, carrying a paper bag with 2 sandwiches and a thermos of soup. She found the young woman sitting on a cot in a shared room, knees drawn up, staring at the floor. "Hey," she said gently, sitting on the edge of the next bed. "I brought food. No pressure." The girl didn't look up, but after a long pause she whispered, "Did you really live here?" "I did," she said. "For 3 weeks. Slept right over there." She pointed to a corner near the window. It smelled like bleach and sadness. A tiny smile flickered. "Yeah, it still does." They ate in silence for a while. Then the girl asked, "How did you get out?" I didn't get out, she said. I stepped forward, one foot then the other. Some days I stumbled. Some days I cried in the bathroom at work. But I kept showing up, even when you wanted to quit, especially then. The girl looked at her then, really looked. Do you think I could work somewhere like you do? I know you could, she said. Not because you're special, because you're human, and humans are built to grow. She didn't promise a job, didn't hand out business cards, just gave her number and said, call me when you're ready to try. A week later, the girl called. She started with the shelter's job readiness workshop. Then she applied for the company's internship program. She was nervous, shaky during the interview, but she showed up clean, on time, and honest about her past. They hired her. That same week, something unexpected happened at the office. Mr. Langston called a company-wide meeting, not about profits or new software, but about values. He stood at the front of the room, no slides, no script, just him and a microphone. A few years ago, he began, I did something reckless. I handed a black credit card to someone I didn't know, a young woman living on the street, and told her to use it however she needed. I thought I was testing her, but really she tested me. She showed me what integrity looks like when no one's watching, and because of that moment, this company has changed. He didn't name her, but everyone knew who he meant. We've hired over 40 people through our opportunity pathway since then, he continued. People with records, with gaps in their resumes, with stories the world told them to hide. And every single one of them has brought something valuable to this place, not despite their past, but because of it. After the meeting, people came up to her, not with pity or praise, but with quiet respect. A veteran warehouse worker shook her hand and said, My daughter's in a tough spot right now. Think your program could help her? She gave him the coordinator's number. Later that day, she found Mr. Langston in the break room refilling his coffee. You didn't have to say all that, she said. I did, he replied, because it's true, and because too many companies talk about second chances but never actually give them. We did, and it's made us better, she nodded. It's made me better too. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. Peace. Like he'd been carrying a weight he didn't even know he had, and watching her rise had helped him set it down. Her life outside work kept deepening too. She'd moved into her own small studio apartment, just one room, but it was hers. She bought a second-hand desk for her laptop, hung string lights above her bed, and kept a single plant on the windowsill that she watered every Sunday. It was alive. So was she. She also started seeing a counselor through the company's wellness program, not because she was broken, but because she wanted to understand herself better. Why she still jumped at loud noises. Why she sometimes felt guilty for having food in her fridge while others went hungry. Why success sometimes felt like a costume she might be asked to take off. Your past isn't a stain, the counselor told her once. It's part of your story, and stories can be rewritten. She held on to that. One Saturday, she took the bus to a quiet neighborhood on the city's edge. She'd tracked down her grandmother's address through an old church directory. The house was small, white with blue shutters, a garden out front even in late fall. She stood at the gate for 10 minutes, heart pounding, before finally walking up the path. An older woman opened the door, eyes wide behind thick glasses. Can I help you? It's me, she said softly. Your granddaughter. Recognition flickered, then tears. They hugged on the porch for a long time, no words, just the kind of embrace that says, I thought I lost you. Inside, over tea and store-bought cookies, they talked. Her grandmother had worried, searched, even filed a missing persons report when she'd vanished years ago. I never stopped hoping, she said, squeezing her hand. Now they talked every week, sometimes in person, sometimes on the phone. Her grandmother came to her college graduation ceremony, sat in the third row, clapping louder than anyone. Back at work, her team was preparing for a big project, a citywide initiative to connect local businesses with people transitioning out of homelessness. She'd spent weeks meeting with restaurant owners, retail managers, even a bike shop owner who agreed to train apprentices. The idea wasn't just to give jobs, it was to build bridges. One evening, as she was finalizing a presentation, Mr. Langston stopped by her desk. You've got a gift, he said. Not just for organizing. For seeing people, she looked up. I just remember what it felt like to be unseen. He nodded. Well, you're seen now. By a lot of people, she smiled. Good. Then maybe they'll start seeing others too. The project launched that spring. Over 50 businesses signed on. Within 3 months, 23 people had started new jobs: dishwashers, stock clerks, delivery drivers, baristas. Not handouts. Real work, real pay, real dignity. She visited each one in the first week, not as a supervisor, but as someone who'd been there. She brought coffee, asked how their first day went, listened to their fears. One young man training to be a mechanic told her, I kept waiting for them to say, just kidding, you're not really hired, but they didn't. They just showed me how to change oil. That's the thing, she said. Most people don't need saving. They just need a chance to prove they can do the work. As her influence grew, so did her sense of responsibility. She turned down media interviews, didn't want to be a poster child. She declined speaking gigs that felt performative, but she said yes to high school career days, to panels at community centers, to late-night calls from shelter residents who just needed someone to say, keep going. And through it all, she never forgot the black card, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a symbol of trust. Someone had looked at her when she had nothing and said, I believe you'll do the right thing. That belief had been the first brick in the life she was building now. One quiet evening, after a long day of classes and meetings, she sat on her fire escape wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights blink on one by one. She thought about how far she'd come, not just in miles or job titles, but in peace. She wasn't running anymore. She was building, and the best part? She wasn't doing it alone. Inside her apartment, her phone buzzed. It was a text from the young woman she'd met at the shelter months ago, now working full-time in the marketing department. Got my first paycheck today. Bought my mom groceries. Thank you for seeing me, she typed back. You did the work. I just handed you the ladder. She put the phone down, took a deep breath of the cool night air, and smiled. The journey wasn't over. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next, because she knew, no matter what, she had what it took to meet it. The invitation arrived in a plain white envelope, tucked between a utility bill and a flyer for a neighborhood food drive. She almost missed it, but something about the crisp paper and the embossed logo caught her eye. National Council for Ethical Business Leadership. Inside was a formal letter. She'd been selected to receive the Community Impact Award at their annual summit. Not as a guest, not as staff, but as an honoree on stage, in front of hundreds. Her first thought wasn't pride, it was panic. She'd spoken to small groups before, sure. Shelter residents, college classmates, even a room of nervous interns. But this? Cameras, reporters, people in suits who'd never slept on concrete. She called Mr. Langston right away. I can't do it, she said, voice tight. They'll expect some big speech. Some perfect story. But my story's messy. It's still unfolding, he didn't laugh. Didn't push. Just said, then tell the messy truth. That's the only kind worth hearing. She thought about it all weekend. Walked through the park, sat on benches, watched families laugh and dogs chase balls. She remembered the alley, the black card, the first day she walked into the office with her head down. The nights she cried over textbooks, wondering if she was fooling everyone. The mornings she woke up and still couldn't believe she had a key to her own door. Maybe that was the point. Not perfection, persistence. She said yes. The summit was held in a grand downtown hotel, marble floors, chandeliers, people in dresses and suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She wore a simple navy dress she'd bought secondhand and had altered herself. No jewelry except her grandmother's silver locket. She kept her hair in a neat braid just like she always did. Backstage, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. A stagehand handed her a glass of water. You'll be great, he said, like he said it to everyone. Then her name was called. She walked out under bright lights, heart hammering, and stepped up to the podium. The audience was a sea of faces, executives, nonprofit leaders, journalists. And there in the front row sat Mr. Langston, not clapping yet, just watching, waiting. She took a breath. I'm not here because I'm special, she began, voice steadier than she expected. I'm here because someone gave me a chance when I had nothing to offer but my word. And I kept that word, not because I'm good, but because I was tired of being treated like I wasn't trustworthy. Like my past defined my future. She didn't mention the black card by name. Didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew the story by now. It had become a quiet legend in ethical business circles. What I learned, she continued, is that poverty isn't a character flaw. Homelessness isn't laziness. Trauma isn't weakness. They're circumstances. And circumstances can change if someone's willing to see the person underneath. She spoke about the young man now fixing bikes, the woman managing social media, the dozens of others who'd stepped into dignity because someone said, try. She talked about the shelter, the GED classes, the nights she studied under a street lamp when her building's power went out. She didn't sugarcoat it, didn't make it heroic, just human. And the truth is, she said, looking out at the crowd, we don't need more saviors. We need more believers. People who look at someone struggling and say, I see your potential, instead of, I see your problem. When she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in applause. Not polite clapping. Real, roaring standing ovation. She saw tears in some eyes, nods in others. Mr. Langston stood last, but he stood the longest. Afterward, people lined up to speak with her, not for photos, but for advice. A CEO asked how to start an opportunity hiring program. A college student asked how to support friends in crisis. A woman whispered, my daughter's in a shelter right now. Is there hope? There's always hope, she said, as long as someone's willing to reach back. Later that evening, at a quiet dinner with Mr. Langston and a few team members, no one talked about awards or press. They talked about the next steps, expanding the internship program, partnering with more community colleges, creating a fund to help employees facing sudden hardship. You've changed this company, Mr. Langston said quietly, raising his glass. Not by changing policies, but by changing hearts. She shook her head. You changed mine first. Back in her apartment that night, she didn't celebrate with champagne or fancy takeout. She made tea, put on soft music, and opened a small wooden box on her shelf. Inside was the black card, still pristine, still powerful, but now framed behind glass mounted on a piece of plain white matting. No caption, no explanation. Just the card and the quiet truth it represented. Trust changes everything. She didn't keep it as a trophy. She kept it as a reminder, not of what she'd been given, but of what she'd chosen to do with it. Life didn't stop after the award. If anything, it sped up. She finished her associate's degree that spring, walked across the stage with her grandmother in the front row, holding a tissue in one hand and a proud grandma sign in the other. She enrolled in a bachelor's program, still working full-time, still mentoring, still showing up. The company launched a national version of their opportunity hiring initiative, and she traveled to other cities, Detroit, Atlanta, Denver, helping local teams adapt the model. She never stayed in fancy hotels, always chose budget places near public transit, always visited the local shelter first just to listen. One afternoon in Atlanta, after a long workshop, a young woman pulled her aside. I saw your speech online, she said. I've been sleeping in my car for 3 weeks. Do you think, could I ever be like you? She looked at the woman, tired eyes, clean clothes, a backpack worn thin at the straps. You already are, she said. You're fighting. That's the hardest part. She gave her the local coordinator's number, bought her a meal, and walked her to the nearest bus stop. As the bus pulled away, she felt that old familiar ache, not sadness, but responsibility. The kind that comes when you've been lifted and now you're strong enough to lift someone else. Back home, her apartment slowly filled with small signs of a life built with care, books stacked by the bed, photos of her and her grandmother at the park, a potted plant that had grown 3 new leaves since spring. She still checked her bank account twice a day, still saved every spare dollar, but now she also gave quietly, consistently to the shelter, to the Second Chance Fund, to students in her old GED class who needed bus fare. She never forgot what it felt like to have nothing, and because of that, she never took anything for granted. One rainy Sunday, she visited the alley one last time, not to remember the pain, but to honor the journey. She brought flowers, simple daisies from the corner store, and laid them against the brick wall where she used to sit. She didn't cry. She just stood there for a few minutes, feeling the rain on her face, then turned and walked away. The next week, she got a call from the university. They wanted her to speak at the fall commencement. She said yes, but only if they let her share the stage with two other graduates. A single mom who'd worked nights while studying, and a veteran who'd overcome PTSD to earn his degree. On graduation day, she stood at the podium again, not in a gown, but in the same navy dress from the summit. She looked out at the sea of caps and gowns, at the families cheering, at the dreams taking flight. "Your degree," she said, "isn't just a piece of paper. It's proof that you showed up, even when you were tired, scared, or doubted yourself. And if you can do that, you can do anything." Afterward, a reporter asked her what she planned to do next. "I'm going to keep building," she said. "Not just a career, a world where no one has to prove their worth just to be seen." She never became famous, never wrote a book or starred in a movie. But her story, quiet, real, relentless, rippled outward in ways no spotlight could capture. Shelter workers quoted her in orientation sessions. HR teams used her journey as a training example. Young people facing hard times whispered her name like a promise. "If she could, maybe I can too." And Mr. Langston? He retired a few years later, not to a yacht or a villa, but to a small town where he volunteered at a youth center, teaching kids how to build resumes and believe in second chances. He kept a photo on his desk, not of a deal closed or a company milestone, but of her, standing in front of the shelter, handing out winter coats. He never called it his greatest investment, but everyone who knew him knew it was. As for her, she still wakes up early, still drinks strong coffee, still walks to work even when it rains. She's not rich by billionaire standards, but she's rich in peace and purpose, in the quiet joy of a life earned, not given. And every now and then, when a new intern nervously asks how she got started, she smiles and says, "Someone trusted me before I trusted myself. Now it's my turn." The black card sits framed on her bookshelf, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a reminder. The most powerful thing you can give someone isn't money, it's belief. And once you've been given that, the only thing left to do is pass it on. There was no grand finale, no final curtain call, just another Tuesday morning. Gray and ordinary, the kind most people forget by lunchtime. She woke before sunrise, as she always did, to the soft hum of her apartment's old radiator and the distant wail of a siren somewhere downtown. She made coffee, checked her planner, and scrolled through messages from the team. A new intern had aced her first customer call. The shelter's winter coat drive was short on sizes medium and large, and her grandmother had sent a photo of her garden, first tomatoes of the season. Life wasn't dramatic anymore. It was steady. And that, she'd learned, was its own kind of miracle. She'd long since stopped thinking of her story as something with a beginning, middle, and end. It wasn't a movie. It was a river, sometimes calm, sometimes rough, but always moving forward. And now, more than ever, she understood that the real work wasn't in the big moments, the award, the speech, the promotion, but in the small, daily choices to show up with kindness, even when no one was watching. That morning, she walked to the office not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The company had offered her a remote role months ago. More flexibility, less commute, but she'd said no. "I need to be there," she'd explained. "Not for the work, for the people." And it was true. The office wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a community. The break room had a bulletin board now filled with thank you notes from program graduates. "Got my first apartment. Key feels heavy in my hand. Told my kids I'm going back to school. They hugged me like I'd won the lottery." She read them every week, sometimes tracing the words with her finger like they were prayers. At her desk, she opened her laptop and began reviewing applications for the next cohort of the Opportunity Hiring Program. 53 this round, more than ever. She read each one slowly, not looking for perfect grammar or fancy experience, but for honesty, for that quiet spark of, "I'm ready to try." One applicant wrote, "I've been clean 112 days. I want to prove I'm more than my worst choice." She flagged it for an interview. Later that afternoon, she met with a group of high school seniors from a nearby vocational school. They were part of a pilot program, students from underfunded schools getting early exposure to careers in logistics and customer experience. Most had never stepped inside a corporate office before. They shuffled in, eyes wide, some in ill-fitting dress clothes, others in hoodies they clearly wore to feel safe. She didn't start with a PowerPoint. She started with coffee and cookies. "Tell me your name," she said, "and one thing you're good at, even if it seems small." A boy with nervous hands said, "I can fix anything with a screwdriver." A girl with braids whispered, "I'm really good at calming my little brother when he's upset." Another said, "I show up, even when I don't feel like it." She nodded. "Those aren't small. Those are superpowers." She told them her story, not the polished version from the summit, but the real one, the hunger, the fear, the shame of asking for help. The way hope felt like a fragile bird in your hands. "You don't need to have it all figured out," she said. "You just need to be willing to learn and to treat people like they matter." Afterward, one student stayed behind. "Do you ever still feel like an imposter?" he asked, voice low. "Every single day," she admitted. "But then I remember, I'm not here to be perfect. I'm here to be present. And that's enough," he smiled. "Thanks. I needed to hear that." That evening, instead of going straight home, she took the bus to the women's shelter. They were hosting a future night, a chance for residents to practice interview skills, get feedback on resumes, and meet mentors. She brought a stack of notebooks and pens she'd bought with her own money. She sat with a woman named Lena, who'd fled an abusive relationship 3 months ago and was now studying to be a medical assistant. "I keep freezing up in mock interviews," Lena confessed. "Like my brain goes blank." "Then don't memorize answers," she said. "Just tell the truth. Say, I've been through hard things and that taught me how to stay calm under pressure. That's not a weakness, it's proof you can handle stress." Lena practiced, stumbled, tried again. By the third try, her voice was steady. "You've got this," she said, squeezing her hand. On the bus ride home, she thought about how far she'd come, not just in miles or job titles, but in peace. She no longer measured her worth by what she owned or how much she earned. She measured it by how many people felt seen because of her. Back at her apartment, she opened her email. A message from the university. Her application to the bachelor's program had been accepted. Full scholarship thanks to a new endowment fund for non-traditional students. She read it 3 times, then called her grandmother. "I got in," she said, voice thick. "I knew you would," came the reply, warm and sure. "You've always been a fighter, baby." She hung up, sat on her couch, and let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of grace. Not everyone got a second chance. But she had, and she wouldn't waste it. The next week, she visited the company's warehouse on the city's south side, a place she'd never been before. Forklifts rumbled, boxes stacked high. Workers in vests moving with quiet efficiency. The manager, a man with salt and pepper hair and grease on his hands, greeted her warmly. "We heard you were coming," he said. "The team's been talking about your program. Some of them want to volunteer as mentors." She spent the afternoon walking the floor, listening. A woman who'd been with the company 20 years told her, "I grew up poor too. Never thought someone would care about my opinion." A young man fresh out of rehab said, "This job saved my life. Now I want to help save someone else's." She didn't take notes, just listened. Held space, said, "Thank you for trusting me with your story." That night she wrote a proposal. Expand the mentorship program to include frontline workers, not just office staff. Let the people who'd been through hard times guide others, not as heroes, but as fellow travelers. Mr. Langston approved it the next day. Months passed in this rhythm. Work, school, shelter visits, quiet evenings with tea and textbooks. She turned 30, celebrated with her grandmother and 2 close friends from the GED class. They ate pizza on her fire escape, laughing about how far they'd all come. No cake, no fanfare, just real joy shared simply. One Saturday, she received a letter in the mail, handwritten on thick cream paper. It was from the young woman she'd met at the shelter years ago, now working as a full-time marketing coordinator. Inside was a photo, her standing in front of a small house with a sold sign in the yard. On the back she'd written, "My first home. Bought it last week. You showed me it was possible." She taped the photo to her fridge right next to her grandmother's garden picture. Life wasn't perfect. Some days were hard. Some nights old fears crept in. But now she had tools. She had people. She had a life built on truth, not luck. And then one ordinary afternoon, something small but profound happened. She was walking back from lunch when she saw a new intern, a young man, maybe 19, standing nervously by the elevator, clutching a folder. He looked lost, scared, exactly like she had on her first day. Without thinking, she stopped. First week? She asked gently. He nodded, eyes wide. Yeah, I don't really know where I'm supposed to go, she smiled. Come with me. I'll show you. As they walked down the hall together, she didn't give a speech, didn't mention her past, just pointed out the break room, the quiet phone booths, the best coffee machine. And if anyone gives you a hard time, she added, you tell them to talk to me. He looked at her, relief washing over his face. Thank you. No problem, she said. We all start somewhere. And in that moment she realized this was the real ending. Not a trophy, not a headline, but this. Showing up for someone else the way someone once showed up for her. The black card was long framed and quiet on her shelf. But the trust it represented? That was still alive, passed hand to hand, heart to heart, in 1,000 small acts of belief. She went back to her desk, opened her laptop, and wrote a quick note to HR. Let's add a welcome buddy system for all new hires, especially those from our opportunity programs. Sometimes all you need is one person to say, you belong here. She hit send, then stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city buzzed. Cars, people, lives unfolding in every direction. Somewhere out there, someone was sitting on a sidewalk, wondering if they'd ever get a break. Somewhere else, someone was handing out a meal, offering a job, saying, try. And that, she thought, was how the world changed, not with fireworks, but with faith. She took a deep breath, turned back to her work, and kept building.